Hello everyone, welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. From a North Korean defector to a full-time professor, the boy who had to suffer hunger in Chongjin in North Korea's Hamgyong-do province has now been giving lectures on diplomacy to university students. After 2 attempts to get away from the reclusive regime, Professor Kim Seong-ryeol was able to settle in South Korea and get a chance to learn. It was not an easy task to pass qualification exams, graduate university, get a master's degree, and receive a Ph.D. But his aspiration to study eventually made him become the very first North Korean defector to become a full-time professor at a university here. What made the boy from North Korea escape the regime to survive? And as a professor now, what does he think about current tensions on the peninsula? Within the Frame invited that very professor to share this unbelievable story. Professor Kim Seong-ryeol from Busan University of Foreign Studies. Welcome, Professor Kim.
Hello.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, Professor. As far as I know, this September you were named a professor at Busan University of Foreign Studies. And this makes the first time that a North Korean defector became a full-time professor at a university in South Korea. How do you like it so far?
I like the campus and students in the university, but the journey was not easy to achieve this goal. I had to push myself, make a short and long-term strategy to be a professor. So now I teach understanding of international politics and inter-Korean relations, and also U.S. foreign policy.
All right, I see. Professor Kim, I'd like to know more about your life. As far as I know, you tried twice to defect from North Korea. Before you first crossed the Tuman River to China, I'd like to know how your life was in North Korea. What made you desperately, wish to escape from the regime?
We lived in northern part of the country, the city of Chongjin in Hamgyong province. And I had actually a good memory with my friends and relatives before the economic crisis broke out. We went to fishing and we went mountain and we played a lot of good things. But after the economic crisis broke out, many people started to suffer from the crisis. And we couldn't survive because of the economic crisis. At the time, the country's distribution system was collapsed, and all the people were panicking. So one of the way to survive was to escape the country. So the first time we escaped the country was a survive purpose. So we heard at the time, that if we got to China, we could fulfill our stomach. So my mom decided to escape.
So it was mainly because of the hunger?
Yes.
I see. So you went to China and you stayed there for around 3 years until Chinese police called your family. And then later on, you were deported back to the North Korea, and you were put in jail before being released 3 months later on. Were you able to witness any severe human rights violations? And how rare is your case of eventually being freed from the jail?
As I mentioned that we got to China, we could fulfill our stomach, but we had to face 3 difficult things. First one is repatriation to the country, and second one is human trafficking, and the third one is labor exploitation. So we tried to avoid repatriation, but I was hired in Chinese company and I was working at night, and suddenly, Chinese police came to our place and arrested me because I was illegal North Korean refugee living in China. And they sent us to, I actually met my mom and my sister at the police station, and we were sent back to North Korea. North Korean, the Department of Security Department started to investigate our case, and they asked us 3 questions. Did you meet South Korean or American or go to church? So we answered, none of them were our business. And they put us in a labor camp. It was, and in the labor camp, I started to think that where's government for us? Where it was the government's obligations? Because, you know, economic crisis was not our fare to deal. It was the government's the failure to deal with the crisis. So from that moment, that was my turning point of my life. I decided to disagree with the political groups in North Korea and disrespect leaders in North Korea. And I decided to escape again in the prison.
So you began to question whether North Korean government, or should I say the regime, was doing its job correctly and properly. And since the answer was no, you decided to escape once more. Right.
I perceived the North Korean regime was not
doing its job properly.
The political groups for the people inside DPRK.
Right, I see. So after you were set free, you escaped the regime yet again, went to China, and then settled in Seoul in 2005. Were there any specific reasons behind your settlement in Seoul?
So second escape was a political decision for me. And when I got to China, I was hired by Chinese Christian pastor. He was also entrepreneur. And I helped him to doing his business. And I was staying in church, actually, and I gradually becoming a Christian. And I suddenly have something that I have to study. I have to learn something, right? Because my teenagers just, you know, escaped with North Korea and sent back to North Korea and then worked in a, you know, construction work environment. So I started, I need to go to college. I need to study something. And then at that time, I heard the South Korean government is supporting us, allowing us to enter the country and then supporting us to go to university. So I tried to look how to get to Seoul. And then I met a broker in Beijing. He helped us to cross the border between China and Mongolia. And eventually we made it to a South Korean embassy in Mongolia, and they helped us to come to Seoul.
I see. So you really wanted to study, and that's the reason why you came to South Korea. Interesting. Well, I'd like to ask more about your education then. I was quite surprised to hear that you passed qualification exams for elementary, secondary, and high school in just around a year. You graduated university and even received a master's degree and also Ph.D. as well. What motivated you to study it like that?
As I mentioned, my teenagers I wasn't able to go to school, right? I didn't have any chance to learn. And also, the North Korea has the problem that educational poverty and also educational gap. People who live in Pyongyang area, they have opportunity to apply universities, but people in different, you know, region, they don't have a chance. But I believe there's a lot of talented young people, but they don't have a chance to learn. So I got to Seoul. I was fascinated by all kinds of philosophy, history. I couldn't imagine in DPRK. So I started study, and then when I taking international relations theory, I was fascinated, and I started interested in the unification of Korean Peninsula. And then I started the unification studies, but I had to learn bilateral or multilateral relations between Korean Peninsula and other countries such as United States and China, Russia, and Japan. So that's how I started to learn international relations. And I actually finished my master's program abroad, but you know, the study never ending. So I continued to study and now became a professor.
I see. Well, like you already mentioned, you were fascinated by the international politics, and maybe that was the reason why you chose that as a major. But I'd like to ask you more about how, if there was any specific area that you wanted to do the research on.
After I explored the unification of Korean Peninsula, I thought that Korean Peninsula is pretty much influenced by international politics, and also division of the Korea is influenced by, Russia and United States and other. So Korean's division is a subdivision from the Great Division, which was called war. So we are living in a divided region as well. So I have to study the international politics and to look at relations between those dynamics and how to find out golden knot to cut and contribute myself for the unification.
I see. You had to know the dynamics regarding the Korean Peninsula, and that is the reason why you chose this international relations. Right. Well, Professor Kim, we have been talking about who Professor Kim Seong-ryeol is as an individual. Now I'd like to ask you several questions as a professor of university. Last year, North Korea successfully launched a military spy satellite and also 5 ICBMs. What do you believe is North Korea's intention behind such provocations, and to what level do you believe North Korea has developed such nuclear weapon systems?
I think Kim Jong Un has doctrine for the country. He announced in 2013 he's going to achieve nuclear power and economic development at the same time. And in 2015, the regime fired Hwasong ICBM and declared they already had achieved nuclear power. And then at the beginning of 2018, the regime started to have a summit, consecutive summit with South Korea and United States for the economic development. But at the beginning of 2019, the summit between United States and North Korea in Hanoi, no deal was, North Korea didn't, both sides didn't have a deal. From that moment, North Korea still trying to, I think Kim Jong Un still trying to how to develop its country's economy. So he is trying to close tie with Russia and China or other Middle East countries, which is like anti-American bloc. And within that bloc, he is trying to get an economy development, but still, because he has to get this justification for ruling the country. Because inside the PRK, many people don't believe he is a leader if he failed to develop its economy.
I see. He needs that justification by developing economy right now.
But in terms of ICBM technologies, I think as long as we don't have engagement policy with North Korea, North Korea continue to develop its technology and the number of nuclear weapons. So we call it vertically and horizontally, the country trying to build up its capabilities of nuclear weapons.
All right, I see your point. Well, Professor Kim, experts forecast that North Korea is going to continue with such provocations in order to boost leverage before the U.S. presidential election begins. Is there any possibility North Korea would even go ahead with the 7th nuclear test this year?
Possibly, North Korea is going to launch the 7th nuclear test and ICBM, because both could be the negotiation agenda if Trump wins the election.
Right.
Because Trump and Kim Jong Un have built trust confidence, and they had exchange letters in 2019, 27 letters between two sides. So I think there will be a possibility both leaders to meet again and to negotiate whatever, maybe a peace regime or give up the nuclear weapons, something like that.
So you see the possibility of North Korea going ahead with the seventh nuclear test in order to make it into a negotiation card with Trump?
But basically, theoretically, actually, a state, the critical purpose is to survive. So Kim Jong Un has to test nuclear, test an ICBM because it's internally for solidarity of the country, and then externally he's trying to deter, extended deterrence from South Korea, United States, and Japan. So that's instinct of the leaders' choices.
Right, that's your point. Well, Professor Kim, we cannot leave out North Korea's human rights violations. And I assume you know better than any of us because you were actually in jail after you were caught by the Chinese police and was deported. What is the status quo regarding this human rights violation situation in North Korea?
I saw a man was killed by electronic shocks, and a couple of women were targeted forcibly abortion. But we were put in a labor camp. But these days, Kim Jong Un put these people in political camp who got caught and sent back to the DPRK. That's the difference, my time and now. And political camp, there's two kinds. One is the 10-year education camp. The other one is permanent camp. So Kim Jong Un tried to put those who are trying to escape the country. So I think the human rights violations is getting serious in the PRK. Also, Chinese government cooperate with Kim Jong Un. I heard you may see the news recently. Chinese government has sent hundreds of North Korean refugees to the country. And they are facing, serious consequences. So the South Korean governments bring this issue to UN and ask Chinese government to obligate the Convention of International Refuge in 1951. But Chinese government they reject that kind of efforts by South Korean government.
Well, you see, Professor Kim, the international community has kept putting efforts to, improve the human rights violation situation in North Korea. I mean, UN General Assembly even passed the North Korean human rights resolution for the 19th consecutive year as well. But no meaningful progress has been reported yet. What further international efforts do you believe should be put in order to tackle this issue?
I think one of the best ways to tackle this issue is to identify the perpetrators and then their occupation and their family members and also the places where human rights violations going on. And these issues has to be reported to UN. We call it naming, shaming strategies. So I think international UN and also human rights NGOs should focus on this work. Also, on the other hand, the South Korean government should establish North Korean Human Rights Foundation according to North Korean Human Rights Act in 2016. And we record all kinds of human violations inside the PRK. I think that's the one way we have to do right now.
All right, thank you for your suggestion. Well, Professor Kim, last year, South Korea showed a great strategic clarity aligning with Washington and Tokyo more than ever. How did you see such a diplomatic direction, and what kind of diplomatic strategy do you believe the Yoon administration should deploy for this year?
I think, at the Camp David, United States, U.S. and Japan and South Korea get together for the security dialogue. But that was not the first time the U.S. tried to make a triple alliance. U.S. actually tried to make this NATO in the beginning of 1950s, which is similar to NATO. But at the time, South Korean government didn't agree to join the alliance because, Japanese colonization of Korea. But after over 70 years, I think the U.S. achieved the dream to, close tie with the three countries. The reason they're doing this is that the rule-based international order is being threatened by Russia and China and other terrorist groups. I think we can just identify the authoritarian regime and versus, democracy regimes. So, and also Yoon's administration foreign policy doctrine is to keep democracy values. So I think Yoon administration continue to join the Trial Alliance and enhance them, exchange information, and also deploy, U.S. Strategic assets in Korean Peninsula. But theoretically, diplomacy is not an ideology. Diplomacy, you have to think about national interests. So the art of ambiguity is good strategy to maintain.
All right, ambiguity could be a great strategy. All right, well, Professor Kim, we are running out of time, but I'd like to ask you this last question. What are your goals and ambitions as a full-time professor, and what message would you like to give to your students?
As a professor, I continue to reading and teaching, and I do like to write articles, meaningful articles and books. And I do like to say to my students, be positive and courageous to break through all kinds of difficulties we are facing now. And on the other hand, I do like to help the North Korean refugees, including abroad and in South Korea, and also want to those who living in abroad, but they don't have a South Korean citizenship. I encourage them to apply, to come to South Korea, to pursue better life. So I'm going to write a book about my story.
Really?
Encourage them to come to South Korea, and also I'm going to create a homepage. I put the contact information and my story, and let them see how to come to South Korea or the United States, freedom countries.
All right. Well, I'll look forward to your website and your book, Professor Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Kim, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.